In the early 1980s, Donna Summer made a decision that few artists at the height of their commercial power would ever risk. She began refusing to perform some of the very songs that had made her famous. After a deeply personal religious conversion, several of her most sensual, disco-era hits no longer fit the person she had become, and rather than quietly compromise, she chose, at least for a period, to leave them off her set lists entirely. A gamble that put her career, her fanbase, and her commercials standing directly on the line, at the exact moment disco itself was already collapsing around her. Few retrospectives of her career dwell on this quieter, more personal conflict, preferring instead to focus on the chart statistics and studio breakthroughs that made her famous in the first place. Yet it was arguably one of the most consequential decisions of her professional life, precisely because so few people outside her closest circle ever fully grasped what it cost her. Donna Summer's conversion to born-again Christianity took hold around 1979 and 1980, a period that coincided almost exactly with disco's rapid fall from cultural favor. According to those close to her at the time, the shift was not a public relations maneuver or a calculated career pivot, but a genuine, deeply personal transformation in how she understood her own life and work. That timing, however, created an unusually difficult professional situation. Her faith was pulling her toward a more restrained, spiritually grounded identity at precisely the moment her label and audience still expected the sensual disco persona that had built her entire career. There was no convenient moment for this reckoning to arrive. It happened to coincide with the exact period when her commercial margin for error had never been thinner. Had the conversion arrived a decade earlier, at the height of disco's cultural dominance, the professional stakes might have looked entirely different. The tension came to a head over specific songs, most notably Love to Love You Baby. The 1975 hit built around breathy, overtly sexual vocal performances that had first established her as a star. According to multiple accounts from that period, Donna Summer grew increasingly uncomfortable performing the song live, viewing its content as fundamentally at odds with her new religious convictions. For an artist whose commercial identity had been built substantially around that specific song, choosing to distance herself from it was not a minor creative preference. It was a direct, deliberate challenge to the very persona her career had been constructed upon, one she could not easily walk back once it became public. Few artists, at any stage of their career, choose to publicly distance themselves from the specific work most responsible for their fame. It was, in effect, a quiet renegotiation of the terms on which she was willing to remain a public performer. This was, by any reasonable measure, a significant gamble. Love to Love You Baby remained one of her most requested and commercially significant recordings, the song most closely associated with her original rise to stardom. Concert promoters, record executives, and longtime fans had every reason to expect it as a staple of any live performance, and removing it, even partially, risked visible disappointment from audiences who had purchased tickets specifically hoping to hear the songs that had defined disco's golden era. Few artists, at the peak of their commercial relevance, would willingly create that kind of friction with their own audience. Concert reviews from the period occasionally noted audible disappointment among portions of the crowd when familiar songs were altered or omitted altogether, a risk she reportedly accepted as an unavoidable cost of staying true to her convictions. Those around Donna Summer during this period have described her as unwilling to simply fake her way through performances that now felt personally dishonest to her. According to people familiar with her thinking at the time, She reportedly felt that continuing to perform certain songs exactly as written, without any acknowledgement of how her own beliefs had changed, would have required a kind of public insincerity she was no longer willing to offer her audience, regardless of the commercial risk that refusal carried. That kind of personal reckoning, playing out under the bright lights of a paying audience, left little room for private compromise. It was, in a sense, a test of whether her convictions could survive contact with an industry built on repeatable, predictable performance. The industry's reaction, according to those familiar with the period, was a mixture of confusion and quiet concern. Record executives who had built substantial commercial expectations around Donna Summer's disco-era persona were reportedly uneasy about an artist voluntarily distancing herself from her most bankable material, particularly at a moment when disco's declining commercial fortunes already made every remaining opportunity for chart success feel more precious and less replaceable than it had just a few years earlier. Some within the label reportedly worried that any further distancing from her signature sound could accelerate a commercial decline that already felt difficult to reverse. For an industry accustomed to artists chasing relevance rather than retreating from it, her posture was difficult to categorize, let alone manage. Media coverage of Donna Summer's religious conversion during this period tended to focus on the novelty of a disco icon embracing born-again Christianity, often treating the story with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, rather than genuine engagement with what the shift actually meant for her artistically. Few outlets at the time examined closely what it meant for an artist to voluntarily walk away from the specific material most responsible for her commercial success, treating it instead as a passing eccentricity, rather than a substantive professional risk she had knowingly chosen to take. That framing, however convenient for headline writers, understated just how much she stood to lose by publicly stepping back from the material that had made her a star. The deeper story, largely unexamined at the time, was of an artist choosing personal conviction over the safer path of simply giving audiences what they had come to expect. Despite the risk, Donna Summer did not entirely abandon her disco-era catalog, and over time she found ways to incorporate elements of her past into live performances that felt more consistent with her evolving beliefs, whether through altered arrangements, different emphasis, or simply choosing which songs to foreground on a given night. This was not, by most accounts, a clean or immediate resolution but an ongoing, evolving negotiation between who she had been and who she was becoming, worked out gradually across individual performances rather than through any single, dramatic public announcement. Those who saw her perform during this period have described noticeable, if subtle, shifts from show to show, evidence of an artist still actively working through the tension rather than having already resolved it. No single performance, by most accounts, offered a definitive answer to how she meant to reconcile her past with her present. That negotiation carried real commercial consequences. Some longtime fans, according to retrospective accounts from journalists and biographers who later examined this period, expressed genuine disappointment at not hearing certain songs performed the way they remembered, and some concert reviews from the era noted the noticeably different tone of her live shows compared to the unabashedly sensual disco spectacles she had once been known for. The gamble, in other words, was not without real cost, even if it never derailed her career entirely. Biographers have since noted that this stretch of her touring career produced some of the more inconsistent reviews of her live performances, a direct reflection of audiences' adjusting to a version of Donna Summer that no longer matched their expectations. Ticket sales in some markets reportedly softened during stretches of this period, though biographers caution against attributing the shift to any single cause. Yet Donna Summer's willingness to take that risk also reflected something important about how she approached her own artistic identity during this period. Rather than simply riding out disco's commercial decline, by continuing to perform exactly the material audiences expected, she chose authenticity over predictable commercial safety, even knowing that choice might cost her goodwill with longtime fans at a moment when she could arguably least afford to lose any. That willingness to risk her own commercial standing for the sake of personal conviction distinguished her from many contemporaries who simply continued performing their signature material unchanged. Many artists facing a similar collision between transformation and career expectations have historically chosen the safer, more profitable path of simply continuing on as before. Donna Summer's choice to do otherwise, however quietly it unfolded, set her apart from that familiar pattern. Biographers revisiting this period have increasingly framed Donna Summer's handling of the conflict between her faith and her disco-era catalog as one of the more quietly courageous decisions of her career, precisely because it offered so little obvious commercial upside. Unlike a calculated image reinvention designed to attract new audiences, her choice to step back from certain material reflected a private reckoning that happened to unfold in the most public possible setting, in front of audiences who had very specific expectations about what a Donna Summer concert should sound like. That the reckoning played out gradually, night after night, rather than through a single dramatic statement, only made the ongoing personal cost more difficult for outside observers to fully appreciate at the time. It was courage measured not in a single headline, but in dozens of small, repeated choices made far from any spotlight of public scrutiny. Looking back, this period reveals a side of Donna Summer's career rarely emphasized in retrospectives that focus primarily on her chart success or her role in inventing disco's sound. The willingness to risk her own commercial standing over a matter of personal conviction, at a moment when disco's collapse already made every remaining opportunity feel precarious, says something enduring about the gap between the glamorous public persona audiences associated with her and the more complicated, evolving person behind it. A gap she chose, at real cost to herself, to no longer paper over for the sake of easy applause. Decades later, that quiet, costly choice remains one of the more overlooked chapters of her career, a reminder that even celebrated performers sometimes must choose between an audience's expectations and their own sense of who they have become. In choosing herself, even briefly, Donna Summer left behind a lesson that outlasted any chart position or sold-out show.